It's good to be back. I'm Gary Brown, and I work for the National Park Service at the Santa Monica Mountains National Recreation Area, which runs from the Hollywood Hills toward the west along the Malibu coastline toward the Santa Barbara Channel, Channel Islands, that area. So what does that have to do with the Pecos Conference? I worked for 13 years for the Park Service at Aztec ruins, and when I left for California, I was determined to keep one foot still in southwestern archaeology at least, so I will be making a big deal out of 6 beads that help me to do that. I apologize for these small visual aids, I'll pass them around, but for anyone who's not quite sure what Olivella shell looks like, you'll have a look here. These are not artifacts. This is just the results of a day's beachcombing on the California coast. But I think most people are familiar with Olivella beads. They're quite common in the Southwest, but not the ones that I'm going to be talking about a little later on. So Chester King is very experienced California archaeologist, a god in California archaeology, a heretic to some people, certainly an expert on shell beads. He's looked at 1 billion of them, I'm sure, over the last 50 years. And when he got word that I had taken a job as the head archaeologist for the Santa Monica Mountains, where he was born and raised, he stalked me on the internet and eventually came around and contacted me. We got a discussion going about shell and Aztec ruins and things like that. And before I left New Mexico, I rounded up all the shell that I could get from Aztec ruins and brought it out to California with me, and Chester proceeded to spend the next year and a half in his spare time, which none of us have much of, looking at shell, and came up with some interesting results. The total sample of shell that he looked at was close to 600 pieces. And it is been sorted out as best we were able to do by provenience and context. We tried to focus on, at least for this presentation, on those that had reasonably good context, and that consists of over close to 304, I think, with a reasonable context, which for Aztec ruins runs into the period from around 1060 to late 1200s when the region is abandoned. The shell that was looked at falls into a number of different categories in taxa, but the overwhelming majority could be identified as Olivella, or at least the identifiable shell fell into that category, not too different from the ones that I'm passing around. Chester is a very experienced expert who can differentiate between the 2 main categories, which are Olivella dama, common in the Southwest, and it's derived from the Gulf of California or from Pacific waters, but warm waters to the south of the international border in Baja California. And the second main species in what is very common in California is Olivella bifurcata, which prefers the cooler waters, so common on the Pacific coastline, but north of Baja. And most of the beads in that category fell into 2 main types, and that's what most of us in the Southwest can readily identify as Olivella beads. The they're about evenly divided between ones that just have the spire removed, and the other end of the shell is the natural aperture where the critter lives. So by removing the spire, you've got an opening at either end and can string the shell, or very commonly what we see in areas that have this kind of preservation is that they were actually sewed onto garments and belts and sashes, things of that sort. And these are very common in California. They're very common in the Southwest, and in places like the Great Basin, you see both of the Olivella species side by side in the very same context on the same strands or the same pieces. The second main category is where both ends of the Olivella shell has been removed, and Olivella, of course, is this basically football-shaped shell, or olive shape. And in these cases, either end has been removed, ground off, and either heavily worked down to a cylinder, or frequently just a little bit worked off either end, so they look more like a barrel shape, or for this event, probably better described as a keg. Very, very nice appearance, because they retain a lot of the natural surface and characteristics of the seashell on both of those types. In the California typology, these are Class A and Class B beads. And as I mentioned, very common, very widespread, all over the place, all over the Southwest, all over the Great Basin, all over California, and quite common at Aztec ruins. So that accounts for about half of the shell from Aztec ruins right there.